Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first of 3 community altogether now FY24 operating budget information sessions with MCPS. My name is Lynn Harris. I am an at-large member of the Board of Education, and I'm very happy to be here today and thank all of you for being in here when out there on November 12th. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I just told these 2 young people up here, they gotta go outside and play today. Anyway, why are we here? And we're here because the community bringing to the school system what you know and what you value about what we do as a public school system is essential for us to create the kind of school system that we all collectively want to have. One that's fully diverse, fully inclusive, one that really meets and seeks to understand the unique needs of every student and every family and bring the resources together and the people together to meet those needs. And so community conversation, student input is really critical to that piece. So we are going to be bringing the vision for the budget, the background for the budget, the process of how we get to that budget to the public so you can better understand the work that we do and actually give us your perspective. Tell us what you value, what you want to see in that budget. And I'm just going to quickly quote our Chief Operating Officer, Brian Hull, who the first time I met him said, "Show me your budget and I will tell you what your priorities are." Absolutely. So that is why we are here. And so again, thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, I am very happy to introduce our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Monifa McKnight.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So I will tell you up front, I'm not one used to standing still at a podium, but I am going to do that today because we have a mic here. But at some point, if it becomes too much, I promise you I will be loud as I'm walking around the room so that you can hear the information that I'm sharing with you. But as Ms. Harris said, first, thank you, Ms. Harris, for being here as our Board of Education member. We have been working very, very hard to make sure we improve communications with our community, knowing that you are our valued stakeholders, our children, and caring for them and preparing for all the things that we need to make sure their educational future is what it needs to be, involves you as parents, as community members, as constituents in Montgomery County. And so we appreciate you spending the time, as she said, on this beautiful Saturday to come inside and listen to us share information with you and for us to hear information back from you about the operating budget. So I am so grateful. And this is going to be about an hour-and-a-half interaction that we have with one another today. But my hope is that you come in. Oh, and we see more people coming. Good morning, welcome. Yes, please come on in. So maybe we are beating the weather today, okay? But we are just thrilled that you're able to be here and hoping that you leave with more information that helps you be more informed about the budget in Montgomery County Public Schools, and most importantly, what comes in, what goes out, and how we use that to take care of the needs of our students in the school system. So with that, I first want to make sure we acknowledge a number of people who have come today who have been a part of, the advocacy and the work around in MCPS and just overall represent leadership in our county. So I'm going to start with acknowledging our county council, any of our county council members here who are sitting council members. Okay. Very good. But I do know that we have some council members elect here today, and I'm going to ask you to stand. First, Natalie Fani Gonzalez. Thank you, Natalie. We had an opportunity to work with Natalie for years as a member of the planning board, and so we look forward to continuing to work with her at the county council. And of course, she brought our #1 constituents, our students, with her this morning from Piney Branch Elementary School. So let's give them a hand for coming and being a part of this conversation today, because we know they could be thinking of a number of other things to do on this beautiful day. I also understand we have Don Lutke here. Is Don here? All right, Don may be joining us, who is also a council member-elect joining us, and then Lorianne Sales may also be joining us as well. But I do see her chief of staff here, Roland. Why don't you do the wave on behalf of Ms. Sales? Thank you so much for being here. And so today, I just want to also introduce MCPS staff. We have a number of staff members here, and today while we're talking about budget, one of the things that I want you to really reflect on and think about as we talk about the budget is, how does this all funnel down to the experience that my child or your niece, nephew, whoever it is that is within Montgomery County Public Schools, how does this budget impact their day-to-day experiences? And as we talk about this, of course, I want you to reflect on that, but I also want you to know who the staff is in Montgomery County Public Schools, because while we may not get into the details of what some of the exact experiences are in the schools that you may want to talk about, I want you to know who to go to after this conversation today. So if I could have MCPS staff who are here stand, and there are quite a few of us. So just know that if you have any questions after this around any particular experience today, you can go to any of the leaders that you see here standing. We are here and at your service, ready to address any questions that you have or anything that you'd like to know to help serve you and your family. Thank you so much, staff, for being here. We appreciate you. I know they also had a ton of things that they had on their to-do list to do today, but I appreciate them being here so much, as well as our communication staff. Thank you all for making this happen. Our interpreters, thank you for being here. Our ASL staff, thank you for being here. We wanted to make sure in our commitment to provide two-way communication with our community that we continue to not have any barriers in the way of anyone understanding the information that we share, and so that we can include everyone in the convening that we bring together. So with that said, today we are going to talk about MCPS operating budget. I first want to distinguish one thing that's different. This past week we had a number of board meetings and we were talking about capital budget. Let me just say right now, let's talk about the difference between the two. I consider our operating budget our foundation. This is what we need to operate on a day-to-day basis as a school system. That's our operating budget. When we talk about our capital budget, that's the budget that goes into building infrastructure, renovation, all of those things that really come into the brick and mortar responsibility, as well as a number of things to keep up the maintenance of our school buildings and facilities. So today, we're talking about the operating budget specifically. Now, if you want to learn more about the capital budget, provide that to us in your feedback. I am happy to continue to follow up and have more forums in the future if that's something that you want us to dig into more so that you can understand that as a community. But I will say, and Ms. Harris can agree, we are in the midst of talking a lot about capital. So if you want to tune into any of our board meetings, we just had a few last week, as well as some hearings to have our public have an opportunity to come and share information about their interests as it relates to the capital budget. So operating budget, capital budget. Which one are we talking about today? Operate. See, I love it. Already made it into a classroom. Today we are talking about the operating budget. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I want to tell you a little bit about just what we're here to accomplish with you today so that you know what it is that I want you to understand about the operating budget. We've spent a lot of time planning and talking about how do we make this conversation meaningful and comprehensive to our public, okay? And so we spend a lot of time talking about that. But today, from this conversations, I want you to understand what dollars we have to invest in our schools. That's the number one thing. What dollars do we have to invest in our schools in Montgomery County? We're going to talk about that. The other is we're also going to understand how we develop the operating budget. I want you to understand that process. I need you to understand that process because I need you to be active in that process. So how we develop the budget is the second thing that I want to make sure you have a good understanding of before we leave today. And the third is I want to make you aware of how we are investing the money that we do have in the school system and what that's going to look like moving forward, okay? So those are the three outcomes that I have for our conversation today as it relates to the budget. So through that, you're basically going to get an understanding of what is the overall financial state of MCPS? What did we get last year? How does that fit into what we're doing now? And we want you to know and understand how to be involved in the process. And if there are any questions that you don't understand, we want you to ask those questions. Here's why that's important. While we don't have every chair filled in this room today, what my hope is that from this conversation, because you have a better understanding of this, you can then go and have conversations with your neighbors, with our other stakeholders and be able to address questions that they may have about the operating budget so that overall we have a much more informed community. Okay? So those are the things that we want to accomplish with you today. And so I'm really going to walk through a process of just helping you to understand exactly what some of this is about. So let's first talk about the budget timeline, because I think this is one that we are shifting a little bit just to make sure that we spend some time ahead of time with helping the community understand the budget. So for those of you who've been in and around MCPS for years, you know that the number one time to start talking about budget is in December. Since I became a teacher in the school system in 2001, I knew that the budget was going to be announced in December. And it's been a number of different evolutions in terms of how we've done that. But that's been the starting point. This year, we're starting a conversation in November. Now, there is going to be a big release in December of our operating budget. But this is to build background knowledge so that when that release comes in December, you as a community will not be surprised. You will understand exactly when I'm talking about the budget to the entire community, what it means. And most importantly, there should be some things in that budget that should reaffirm to you and for you exactly why those investments are what they are. So if we go to the timeline, we'll see this, and that happens in December when I, as a superintendent, recommend a budget to the Board of Education. Okay? Now, what happens behind the scenes is, quite frankly, we start talking about budget in the spring, the year before. It's almost like the year before we even wrap up a budget, we're already planning for the next year. But the release and my recommendation to the Board of Education happens in December. And so once I make that recommendation to the board, they consider what my recommendation is. The board then allows an opportunity for you, the public, to come in and react to my recommendation. So that is when you will see us schedule work sessions and public hearings, and they'll be at CESC, and that's when we invite our public out to come and tell us, what is it that I've recommended in this budget that you believe in and you believe has to be a priority, and why? And are there some things that you don't see in the budget and you're trying to get an understanding of how the system's going to address those particular things? So we do all of that after the budget is released in December, and these hearings essentially happen in January and early part of February. Now, what happens then, most importantly, after we hear from the public and get all of that information, then the board tentatively adopts the budget, and then it moves forward. And then the Board of Education in March tentatively adopts the budget, and then the Montgomery County Executive and County Council then begin to consider the budget, okay? And so then, that's when they begin to hear from you. So you see, you first start talking with the Board of Education about what you see and how you're reacting to the superintendent's budget. After that happens and the Board of Education moves the budget forward to be considered by the county, then the county is having a conversation about the overall budget for the county. That's not just MCPS. That's all operations within the county. So if you have an interest in what's happening within the school system and you think that there are things to protect within the budget that we have laid out within the school system, then that is your opportunity then as community members to then do that advocacy with the county executive and with the county council, okay? So that's how that part happens. And so as they begin to hold their sessions and hearings from the public, which happens between March and May, then that is when it is your opportunity again to respond to MCPS's budget. And then in May, the council votes, and we have May 25th, 2023 as our date, that the council will vote on the MCPS operating budget. So at that point in time, we will know exactly how much money Montgomery County Public Schools is going to get. And that is when the comparison starts to what did the system ask for, and then what are we going to be provided. So then it's simple math from there, right? If we then get the money that we've requested, and we would have laid out everything that we're doing with what we've requested, then we move forward with all of those investments that we've shared with you. If that budget is not approved based on what we've requested, we then have to go through and cut and prioritize what can we not have, okay? So I wanted you to see that process from beginning to end. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we look into the next year, which we'll call the 23-24 school year, there are already a number of considerations that are at the top of my mind. And these considerations didn't just come, as I shared before. It's almost, we start talking about what those priorities are and have to really look into the future and use the data that we have available that tells us this is what is important and this is what we're going to need to invest in. So the things that you see are the things that are at the top of my mind, because these are things that we've heard from you. If you were able to participate in any of our community sessions last year, our community conversations, I spent a lot of time in different spaces going out, listening to our community, because I wanted to know what are the things that you care about and what do you want to see happen in our school system, and most importantly, why. It was because of your experience and the narratives that you were able to share that we were able to compile that information to really look at, this is the experience, these are the experiences of our community with our school system, and here's what they're saying are the things that are really important to them. And so you've also come out and shared at public comment at our board meeting what your priorities are as well. That's another forum. The Board of Education members, and I just saw another Board of Education member come in. Ms. Evans, you want to wave your hand? Thank you for being here. That's when we have an opportunity to also hear from our public. Public comment is important because that's when we're able to hear what those experiences are and what it is that you need from us as the Board of Education, the school system, to make the experience for your child one that's meaningful. And then there are community engagement opportunities that we actually have all the time. And our job is to continue to listen and figure out what are the implications for what you're saying it is that you need, and where do we continue to see the same conversations coming back and forth that allow us to say this has to be a priority for our school system. And so that investment always starts with our students. In our community conversations, it became very clear as we pulled all that data, and even those who were unable to participate in the conversations, people were able to give information online and they shared. I will tell you, that is the wonderful thing about us in Montgomery County. We are going to share more than enough information, which is great for us because then we don't have to guess. And this is what we heard from our community. The first thing is that they want to make sure that students have a valuable experience in the classroom that is going to prepare them for the future, that they are learning and prepared for the future. For us, we share that same common goal because we want to make sure every student who leaves Montgomery County Public Schools leaves here college, career, and community ready. So that's what you said. Here's the second thing our community said to us. We want to make sure that our teachers and our staff are equipped to make sure that the experience that happens in the classroom can provide that for my child, especially considering my child's specific needs, okay? So with that said, that fits squarely within what we see as our responsibility and what it is that we need to do. So when you think about our investments, I can tell you right now, our investments are going to start with our students, and those investments are going to be investments that are in our classroom and that are in our schools, because that is where it happens, okay? And this is where our students' experience in the district truly does come to life. I mean, we are in this room and we're having conversations today, but when our friends go to Potty Branch on Monday and they go into their classroom, there's an experience that has to happen there, and all this coordination and all this investment that we talk about has to make meaning to them. And so that's why when we think about how we prioritize the students and their experience in the classroom has to be the place that we continue to focus on to make sure that happens. Because we have to build a great experience for them. We want them to be engaged. We know that we have a lot of ground to make up based on the learning experiences that they had online over the last couple of years. Many of our students thrive, and let me tell you, we have paved the way in so many ways to break down barriers of access due to virtual learning, and we're excited about that. But we also know this is a person-to-person interaction. Okay, that's why I went into teaching. I'm an extrovert, okay? I want to be with people. I want to spend time with, and spending time with children in the classroom and really getting to know who they are and how you're preparing them for their learning, and then to have the opportunity to see that, to let them ask questions, interact to it. And I'll tell you, teachers are learning at the same time as they're interacting with students. It's a two-way situation that goes on in that classroom every day, but that's what we have to protect. And in order for that to happen, we have to invest in the people. And that means the people who are in the classrooms and in the schools with our students. So I wanted to make that very clear because as we talk about investments, that's where you're going to see many of our investments go, because at the end of the day, it has to be about the adults who are serving our children. And they have to be prepared, they have to be committed, and they have to understand that learner very well to be able to meet their needs. So with that said, I wanted to share a little bit about where we are today with our budget compared to last year. So as we look at next year's budget for fiscal year 2024, I must say that we are fortunate to have a really solid foundation. And I am grateful to our county. Montgomery County continues to invest in the education of this community. The school system is always going to be committed to making sure we protect that interest. And I share that with you because I mean it, and that is something that you will never have to guess about my commitment to this community. The school system is going to work hard to meet the needs of every single child in the classroom, but that means we have to continue to invest in what that looks like. We have to be very thoughtful about what that investment has to look like today. We have to be thoughtful about it because we are covering ground and making up ground for the last 2 years. And that recovery is not going to happen in 1 year. I wish it will. We're doing everything within our power to make every single day count. But what I do know is that recovery is going to take some time. And so as we think about that recovery and the requirement for that, last year, our county really did make an investment for us, and we're very grateful for it. So this current year, we're actually benefiting from a 5% more increase than we had the year before in our operating budget. So we were able to have a $138 million increase in funding that we were able to secure from our county specifically. And let me be clear, this additional funding was one that we said we need extraordinary funds for extraordinary times because the needs were great. Last year, we came into school excited in August, thought we were kind of through with COVID. You all saw what happened. We were nowhere close to that. And so it was another year that we didn't anticipate to have the challenges that we did have to experience. And so I'm really grateful to our county government acknowledging that and recognizing that not only were we addressing needs for students academically, but the social-emotional needs and wellness investments that we need to make for our students as a result of COVID-19 were requiring us to have to build new structures, quite frankly, that just did not exist before. Now, with that said, it probably should have. So I'm grateful that we're in that place. But in terms of our funding, let me be clear, this additional funding that we received during the pandemic was incredible, but I want to acknowledge that it's going to require that we continue to invest in the recovery efforts. Next slide. So we've been very intentional about how we spend our money and how we manage that so that it goes right back to the priorities that we've talked about. Earlier in the spring, and I continue to bring the priorities of the strategic plan and my 3 priorities for the system moving forward, and it's focused on rebuilding trust through communications. Example, we're here today. Second, making sure we're providing well-being spaces for our students and staff. And then third, returning to equitable teaching and learning. And so as we think about those priorities, we've invested our priorities in those areas. But when we think about the $138 million increase that we had in last year to this year, I also want to break a few things down to you. So 75, 3/4 of our budget goes to salaries and benefits to MCPS staff. Okay? Just let that sit there for a moment, because oftentimes we're talking about budget, people look at the number, and I need you to understand how this, what this means. So 75% of our budget goes to salaries and staff. That leaves how much? 25%. Now, that 75% is important. Just a moment ago, I was just talking about the importance of investing in the people to do the work. This is a people-driven profession. We have to have children with people. We have to have things in place to meet all of their needs, and there are many different needs that existed prior to COVID-19, and there are many different needs that exist now. And most importantly, we've got to send our kids to college, and we need them to go there and be prepared. And we're still going to do that. And we're going to send even more to college. And we're going to send those going out into career to be prepared to be in the careers that they want to go into. Because you know who they become? Business owners. And where do we want them to have their businesses? Right here in Montgomery County. So we're just invested in those who are going into those career paths as we are those going into college. And for those students who have gone through very special, unique programs, and we spend a lot of time in our school system to get them community ready, we want them to still go out and thrive and do different things in our community so that they can still show their contribution to the community. So that means that we have to invest in all the people who have to help us do that. Okay? So 75% of our budget goes to support salaries and benefits for MCPS employees, and not to mention how we also have to take into consideration things like inflation and the cost of living for people to be able to live and enjoy the work that we need them to do. So I wanted to point that out to you because with that investment, when you look at our budget as a whole, many often ask, well, where does all of this money go? Much of it goes into the people and them getting the salaries and benefits that they deserve to get, and we actually need to keep them. I think we've all experienced and seen what it's been like to really struggle to provide the services to our students when we don't have the people, from the teacher in the classroom to the bus driver who has the responsibility to get them to school. So it's actually not something that we can sacrifice because we need the people to be able to be present and available to provide our students with what it is that they need. So then we take the additional money and strategically invested it in our priorities. So that 25% that we talk about, that goes into those priorities, and accelerators is what we call them. So if we look forward to, like this past year in the budget, we talked about the expansion of pre-K. That's a really big part of what we have to do. That's considered an accelerator. Okay, so that means that 25%, that's an example of an accelerator that comes out of that, and a number of other programs that you'll hear when we talk about, when we release the budget, you'll be able to say, these accelerators are coming from only 25% of that budget. So I wanted you to understand that so that you know exactly where our money goes. Next slide, please. Oh, you're already there. Okay, so we're going to take that budget as our starting point and build on it, thinking about what we need to do for our people and then what we need to do for the accelerators that's going to move our students to the next step. We start building it through and making changes based on enrollment. That's another big factor. I just talked about 75% of the budget going to staff. So it has to be the staff that is available for the number of students that we have. Anybody want to take a guess of how many more students we got into the system this year? So far, because this goes on all year. Close. Hi, Esther, good morning. 2,000, she said 3,000, 2,000. Now, we're excited about that because we're returning our enrollment numbers to pre-pandemic time. That means our community is bringing our students back into our school system, which is exactly what we want and where we want them, and that's exciting. But as that enrollment continues to go up, that means we then have to hire more and new people. And as this enrollment considers, because it would be very nice if it all happened and no one else enrolled after August 1st. That is not the way that it happens. I guarantee you we'll be enrolling people on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. It happens every single day. And so we have to prepare a budget based on the enrollment that we are aware of, and also acknowledge that we are a mobile school system and students are always coming through and enrolling in our school system, and we want to be prepared for them when they come. Okay, and so that means taking into consideration what those learners are going to need and making sure we have the resources available to serve them when they come. And sometimes that means predicting who's coming and what needs they may have and having those resources ready to go. And so the more students mean we need more teachers, we need more paraeducators, and we need more bus drivers, okay? And then after accounting for our enrollment, then our employees then have to get raises to stay in and be invested in doing the work that we ask them to do. And then we have to think about how the additional strategic accelerators that we put in place are being prepared to meet the needs of our students. So as we do all of this, this is why I continue to come back to the theme all together now, because when you think about the budget and we put all the pieces together, student enrollment, inflation, accelerators, keeping employees engaged and supported through their professional learning so that they can not only be prepared for students, but they're being prepared for students through their learning. All of that has to fit nicely together. And it's really hard if you can't do all of that simultaneously. So when you think about the MCPS budget, if we don't address accelerators, that means we can't prepare for the future. But we have to have the employees stay and do the work that we need for them to do. So this is why when we share our budget, we may share most of the accelerators, but when you think about that number that comes out overall in terms of how MCPS is funded, always remember what we have to do to make sure we have the people available to do the work, and then how the accelerators will help us move the work that we need to do straight into the future. So, next slide, please. With that said, I am going to have our our finance team, who are amazing individuals. I have to tell you, anybody here ever work in finance? Okay, it's stressful. I can say that on behalf of them. We go to them all the time as we're asking questions about how much is this going to cost? What do we need to do? If we got 200, 300 more students coming up in an area that we didn't plan for, where do we move money from this place to this? And they are always there and ready to be able to say, okay, we've thought about this and this is what we've done. And so I just want to thank them for the work that they do. And I'm going to have them come up and share with you a few more technical things, but we agreed we were not going to give you a statistic lesson today. But there are some things that I do want them to share about the overall financial picture of our county and where we are in Montgomery County Public Schools and how that's gotten us to where we are today, but most importantly, where we need to go this year and beyond. So with that, before I have them come up, I want to be very clear about basically what my role is in this as a superintendent. I was thrilled to be able to come and have this conversation with you today because to me, this is one of the most impactful decisions that I can make and bring forward to the board to keep our school system getting what it needs right now to have our students college, career, and community ready, and at the same time, what we need to do to prepare for the future right now. So it's important, it's critical, and I wanted you to understand that my role first starts with listening to you. This is the first year we're having these types of conversations, and I'm going to continue to have the community conversations because when this budget rolls out, I want you to see the things that you've shared and what the feedback that you've provided to the school system squarely fitting into what the Board of Education and myself have put forward so that you can understand and see that we're listening to you. You know what the experience are. The children come home to you. They're with us all day, and we love and care for them and take great honor in that. But then when they're home, they're doing that homework, that follow-up with you. And the conversations that they're having with you, you're seeing how the application is happening of all the things that they're learning in the school system. So listening to you, our students and our families, our community is really important, and we're going to continue to do that. So that's the first thing that I have to do to make sure that the operating budget is reflective of what you see and what you think the needs are. Through listening to you, this is how I help shape the vision of the system. The finance drives how well the vision can be implemented, okay? And so as I listen to you, that helps me further say, what do we need to do next year? And what do we need to get done in the next 2 years to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students in our community? I also want to make sure that your hopes and dreams and aspirations for the school system are honored in what you see, because the investment of the school system comes from you. This is tax money that is invested in the school system and in the community that we live in. So it's an automatic disconnect if your dreams, hopes, and aspirations for the school system, you don't see that fitting into what you see happening with the children and in our schools and within our community. Now, does it mean that it's always perfect? No, nothing ever is. But we got to continue to work on it and talk about what's working and what's not so that we can adjust that. But I only know how to do that through hearing and knowing what your hopes, aspirations, and dreams are for your children so that we can make sure we are partners in making sure this investment happens for them. And so with that, I'm able to set goals for our school system and share that with you. And then from there, I get to actually become the advocate for the stories and the examples and the things that you share with me. When this budget is released, if I had a conversation with you, if you sent an email to our communications team, if you share whatever your experience is, and I'm looking at our student performance data and I'm talking to our students and they're telling me what they need and all the things that are working for them and the things that don't, I have to then become the advocate for all of those things. And so that's my role in being able to establish and develop this budget. And I'm going to continue to do that. I got to tell you real quick, a perfect example was last week on Monday. It was a professional day for staff. So the children were either at home with you or they were at one of our activities. I'm hoping they were at one of our activities. I was with our students at Top Golf in Germantown. How many of you have ever been there? Isn't that amazing? So it's a great business in our community, and I will say as a superintendent, I think it's important to continue to invest in our businesses here and to build those relationships. And I can't tell you how many MCPS students, graduates, I ran into there who are working there, and they were just great. But we took over 300 students there, okay, on this past Monday as one of the pilots for our out-of-school time initiative. That's an example of something that's an accelerator. Why is that accelerator important? When did that come up? It's happening now, but the vision for that I had, 2 years ago, okay? When I said, all right, we've got to be able to have more time for our teachers to really know how to take care of the learning needs of our students. And they have to spend the time to invest in doing that. You know, our teachers go home, they're grading papers. I mean, I was one, taking tests. They're calling you as parents, as they should, explaining what's happening with your child. That's a lot. So when and where is there the time to learn for them? That has to happen. But you know what? I don't want you being concerned about what is my child to do when the teacher is actually spending this time taking care of the learning that they need to take care of so that they can be the best teacher when they're in the classroom with their students. To me, the answer is easy. Both are priorities. So the out-of-school time initiative is to make sure we have enough initiatives across this entire county with all of our partners. I mentioned Top Golf on Monday, but parks and recreation, because I asked our students, I was there for an hour and a half. Mr. Stockton was with me. I went around. I said, tell me what you think about today. So many of our kids said, I've never played golf, but I want to play golf now. I'm like, great. We inspired you to try and do something different. And then those, some of those who said, well, could we have an opportunity to play soccer? Could we have an opportunity? I mean, they told me all the things that they would want to do. And then I said, okay, well, what about those of you who want to spend some extra time, learning some different and new skills? What would that be? So of course they came out art camps, literacy camps, math camps, debate teams. This is what your children told me that they want to do on those days that their teachers are taking care of their professional learning. Again, this planning started 2 years ago. We're now getting to the point of implementing it. And so I share that with you because when I have to stand out and talk about the power of out-of-school time and how that cannot be something that is not a priority, that is something that we don't value, I say that because I know that the investment in the teacher has to happen, and they've got to be prepared for the students. I get to say that because I see the power, and I hear from the students when they get to learn new and exposed to different things that they weren't used to. And so when I then advocate to you, the county council, for why these initiatives are important, I know what I'm talking about. And then I get to go to the state. And then I get to go to them and say, why do you have us only have 180 days counting as instructional days when we're doing all of these other things that are instructional for our students? Why can't they count? That's looking into the future, okay? And so these are the types of investments that we have to think about, and I then become an advocate for how all of this happens and nothing is compromised because it all has to fit together, and it's all important. And most importantly, our children are worth it. They're worth it. Next slide, please. So before we move on to our budget team, I just want to share with you a little bit about where our money comes from. And so as you look at the slide, you're going to see that 63% of our budget comes from the county. This is a big misnomer for people. Many people believe, oh, all of your money comes from the state. It does not. That's why we are an amazing county in Montgomery County, and I love the fact that we invest in our education because we know that's the future of it. So it's important to have a community who understands that when they have to actually support 63% of that budget coming from the local body. 30% of it comes from the state, okay? And the finance team will talk a little bit about what that is and how the state calculates that. And then 3% comes from federal. And I find that very interesting because 3% of the funding body comes from federal, but we get a lot of mandates from where? Federal, okay? And then 3 come from enterprise and special revenue, and then 1% is our fund balance. So I wanted to share this with you because oftentimes when I'm out talking about the budget, there is much confusion often with how much is coming from a local investment and how much is coming from the state investment. So I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to clarify that. Next slide, please. And so you'll see that 90% of our budget is dedicated to investing in staff. This is basically what I was sharing with you earlier. When you look at this pie chart, what you will see, all of this gray area is related to salaries and benefits, almost 90% of our budget. So all of the other areas that you see, the equipment that we use, contractual services, supplies and materials, and other things that we need only represent about 10% of our budget. And so we spend the vast majority of that on people because we want that investment to be one that becomes meaningful in the classroom. I want to continue to say that because that's really, really important. And now more important than ever, our investment in staff, I think, is more important than it's ever been because we've seen the impact, not just in Montgomery County, across the nation, with how difficult it is to operate when we don't have the staff to do it. So that investment has to continue to be made. And we are a great school system, I gotta say, because we have great people. People wanna do well. They want our children to excel and take pride in the jobs that they do. I was at a bus depot recently and I was talking with the bus driver and he said to me, my bus is the first classroom they experience in the morning. I love that. I love that. And I can tell you, the bus was so clean. He then went on to show me the pride that he took in his bus. I was like, I think this is the cleanest bus I have ever seen. And of course, he was sharing with me the importance of the investment in the materials and taking care and the maintenance of the buses, because he said, this is just as impressionable for our students when they get on my bus in the morning. I want it to be a bus that they take pride in their school system. And so I share that narrative with you because, again, we have great people all over the system who want the best for our children. And we have to continue to invest in them so that they feel very supported in that. And so I continue to say we are a great school system, again, because we have great people in it. Next slide, please. Now, I wanted to share this with you because we also always compare where we are to others, right? Now, Montgomery County is the 14th largest in the nation and the largest in the state of Maryland. Okay, I'd say by far, the largest. And so I want to note that although we are the largest school system in the state, we have the smallest budget for administration to support our schools. Oftentimes, and I say that to you because people say, oh, well, you have central office people and you have all of these people. There's another slide. There we go. There you go. I was like, this is the slide. 2% of MCPS budget goes to administration. Check out everybody else. Anne Arundel, 2.8%. Prince George's, 2.8%. Baltimore County, 3.4%. Baltimore City, 4.9%. And these are much smaller districts than Montgomery County Public Schools. So I also wanted to share this with you because I'll always hear questions and narratives that people ask. And so I want to pull the data to be transparent with you so that you know and understand that. Sometimes I look up and I'm like, we have really skimmed ourselves in a lot of ways in terms of the size of the organization that we have to run. But this is one slide I definitely wanted to share with you because as we grow, we're also going to need to provide schools with the necessary support that they need to be efficient in doing their work. So I wanted to make sure you knew and understood that because this is oftentimes a question that comes up. So with that said, these were the big items that I wanted to make sure you understood about the budget. the amount that goes into our budget, what it is and why it is and where it comes from. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brian Hall, our Chief Operating Officer, so that he can share a little bit more with you about the school system investment in our students' future and what your engagement will also need to be as you understand where we are and how you then come forward and share some of your specific narratives with you. But I want to thank you for letting me go through this with you. I hope that what I was able to share with you, the examples, the slides, it was able to build some foundation of understanding of exactly where the dollars are in our school system, how we're using them, where they come from, and where they're going. Okay? All right. At this moment, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hall.
All right, thank you, Dr. McKnight. Board members and community members, thank you all for coming out. It is really important that we take time out of our busy schedules and that you do the same to have this communication and make sure that we're able to share with you some of the details of what, frankly can be a very complicated process. We've got a very large budget. Actually, can we go back to the previous slide, the per pupil funding? So we've got a very large budget, almost $3 billion. Because we're a very large system. As the superintendent said, the 14th largest in the entire country, educating over 161,000 students every day. So how do you compare the size of our budget to maybe some of the other districts in the state and around the country? Well, looking at it on a per pupil basis. So how much are we funded for each individual student that we're educating every single day? And this shows that. So, we're behind some of our neighbors, ahead of others. Kind of right on par with our some of the surrounding districts here. One of the challenges that we do face in Montgomery County, of course, is the cost of living. It does cost more to live here, and that's something that our employees, from our bus drivers to our teachers to our principals, deal with. And so it's important to point out that, while we're dealing with a very high cost of living in Montgomery County, our funding really is just kind of on par with our surrounding districts and frankly, even behind some of them. And while this seems like a lot of money, over $20,000 per student per year, I would ask you, what is a more valuable way, a more important way to invest our county's money than in the future of our children who will be the leaders of this community someday? And I also added in there, I recently moved to Montgomery County from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so we added Minneapolis in there because the funding is almost identical between Minneapolis Public Schools and Montgomery County Public Schools. But having recently moved, I can tell you the cost of living is not comparable at all. And so I just wanted to kind of put that in there as one national kind of benchmark that we're looking at, as well as the other large districts in the state. So this slide, I know the numbers are small here, but it shows again, the per pupil funding starting in 2001 up through this current year. And as you can see, it was going up until about 2008, 2009, and we all know what happened in 2008 and 2009, the Great Recession. And so districts all across the country saw their funding cut or, if nothing else, stagnant for several years after the initial climb there. And so you can see for a number of years, it was stuck at around $14,000 per student. And then recently, as the economy has recovered and the tax base has recovered, the funding has, once again continued to increase at a modest rate. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the same data, but adjusted for inflation. And the reason that this is important is because these are the real dollars that we're dealing with. These are this represents the purchasing power that the district has, because each year fuel gets more expensive, salaries get more expensive, supplies get more expensive, and everybody, I think, at this point, given the historic inflation that we're seeing currently across the country of 8% from one year to the next, understands that if your salary stays the same and the price of everything is going up, you just can't purchase as much. And so again, you see, even adjusted for inflation, the funding that our state and that our county was investing in the school system prior to 2008, 2009, was a pretty significant increase year over year, which meant that the school system was able to do more, offer more, pay more during that time. And since then, unfortunately, there was a significant downturn and then, a slight uptick. But it's important to note that in 2002, labeled on here fiscal year 2023, we are actually funded at a lower rate when you adjust for inflation than we were back in 2009. And obviously, over that time, especially during the pandemic, the demands and the needs on the system have only increased. The mental health needs that our students have, their well-being, the food service costs, the costs of our staff have all continued to increase, and unfortunately, the funding has not kept up. Next slide. So as we talk about the pandemic and the impact that has had on our students and our staff and our entire community, it's very real. So one of the things that was able to kind of get us through this very challenging time was an extraordinary and unprecedented investment in education by the federal government. So I don't know if people have heard of ESSER, the ESSER funding. The Elementary and Secondary Relief Act pumped almost $400 million into Montgomery County Public Schools between 2020 and then the money will expire in 2024. So the budget that we're building right now is the last budget where we will have these ESSER funds to invest. And so at this time next year, when we're building the budget, we will be not only building it without the additional ESSER funds, but also trying to figure out how we're going to take the investments that we have in ESSER right now, the ones that are working, because we're not going to be able to keep all of them. And so our team is working very hard to evaluate all of the large programs that we have funded through ESSER to determine what is working, what is moving the needle for our students. And then we're going to have to figure out how we take those investments off of the federal funds when they run out and move them back to our operating budget, which is made up mostly of the state and the local funds. So some of the things that we've been able to invest in was summer school. The last couple of years, we've offered summer school across the district at all of our schools at no charge for any of our students, which is an absolutely wonderful opportunity and has addressed one of the large needs coming out of COVID, which was the lost instructional time. The same thing with tutoring. We've been able to offer free tutoring for any of our students that want it. I've got two students in the system, and one of them has utilized the online tutoring platform, and it's just been wonderful. He can log on anytime and have one-to-one tutoring right from his bedroom. We've also enhanced the enrichment programs that we have, our classroom monitors, and importantly, the professional development that we provide to our staff. Along with that, we've had an unprecedented investment in technology so that we were able to keep our students connected during the out-of-school time, during the pandemic. Many of our students don't have access to technology or to internet in their homes. And so one of the first things that this district did in 2020 when the pandemic hit was figure out how are we going to get computers to all 160,000 of our students and make sure that they have access to internet in their homes so that they can stay connected, stay engaged, and continue learning. The strategic partnerships, and the superintendent touched on this, have been critical to the success of this school system historically, currently, and especially during this pandemic, as again, the needs of our students, our staff, and our community have only grown. Again, touching on the mental health work, social workers, we've put a large investment into social workers, making sure that all of our high schools have social workers that are working directly with our students and addressing the needs that they may have. Obviously, the infrastructure costs. Every fall when the students get back into school, we get some really hot days. Inevitably, across our 210 schools, there are some challenges with the HVAC and the air conditioning. And so, again, with 210 large school buildings, it's a big footprint. And so we need to continue to make investments in our infrastructure to make sure that it is maintained and continues working to serve our students and our staff. And finally, for food service. During the pandemic, we continued offering meals and food for students who may not otherwise have access to it, especially during the challenges of the pandemic. And so that was that should be near the top. That was one of our first priorities, is making sure that we were taking care of our kids and our most vulnerable learners, that they had both access to the learning through the technology, but also healthy meals provided to them. Next slide. Okay, and I think the superintendent is going to come back up and kind of walk us through, again, where you all can kind of lean into this process. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, so we are wrapping up now because we want to hear from you and engage with you for the rest of our time on this beautiful day. But I just wanted to put some key dates up here with you that I mentioned earlier, but wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to open your phones up, put it on your calendar, do some save the dates, and most importantly, think about, based on the information that you've heard today, how do you want to be a part of this budget process moving forward? And we invite you to be a part of it and to stay involved. As I mentioned before, we want you to be informed. We want you to also advocate for your students and their experiences in MCPS, and make sure that you understand the funding bodies that continue to contribute to our school system's budget. So in the timeline, I want to highlight for you where you can advocate and insert your voice in the process over the next few months. And you'll see that it starts in December when the budget release occurs, and I see you all taking pictures of it, yes, and it actually ends all the way in June, which is when the Board of Education votes to approve the operating budget. But much that happens in between that in terms of participating in hearings for the Board of Education, participating in hearings at the County Council, and also understanding how this MCPS budget fits into the overall budget of the county. Understand our county executive is also holding budget forums now. I think it's really important to engage in that so that you can see what the big picture is, as Montgomery County Public Schools is just one part of that overall budget for the county. So please make note of all of these dates. And here's a specific way along the way that you can engage in the juncture of the process as well. Today kicks off our budget process. You are our first engaged in our budget process for Montgomery County Public Schools. I will forever remember you because it's our first community forum before we kick off the formal budget in December, and so I'm so grateful about that till today starts. And then we're going to have 2 other budget forums occurring. The next one is going to be a virtual one because we also want to recognize that many are able to participate when we hold the virtual forum. So we're going to have that on November 28th. And there's a QR code there that you can also scan that has information. And then November 30th, we're also going to have a budget forum, and that's going to be at our office at CESC in Rockville. And we're going to hold that session in Spanish only. And so we will have that on the 30th as well. I look forward to it, and yes, I will be there presenting, and look forward to engaging our community in that space. And so then again, I mentioned the Board of Education, after the budget is released, will hold their hearings in January. We look forward to seeing you there and coming out and participating. And then the County Council will hold their public forums to hear from the community and want to hear what your priorities are. The QR code takes you to the dates of the forums, and then so make sure that if you want to scan it, you'll have that and can save it just so that that's available to and for you. All right, so with that, I want to note that our immediate next steps is for you to mark your calendar, which I already mentioned. The forum's coming up. If you want to come back again, if you want to come back and bring others, if you can most importantly encourage others that you know who are not here today to come out, please make sure you go out and you can be validators in our community for the importance of getting the information so that you can know how to become involved. We're also going to hold a forum with our business community. Earlier, I talked about out-of-school time initiative and the importance of making sure that everything that we do in the school system comes back into the economy of Montgomery County so that we can continue to thrive now and for years to come. So we look forward to holding that forum as well. That we don't have a date finalized for, but of course, I will be able to come back and share with you in my release of the budget how these forums are informing the things that I'm bringing forward to the Board of Education as recommendations. So with that, I think we have accomplished our outcomes. And so I am going to stop there and allow you to ask any questions that you may have, make any comments. If there's anything that you want to get clarified, myself and our finance team are here to address any and all of your questions or to listen to experiences that you want to share. The staff is also here because, as I said, if there's something that you want to talk about beyond the budget process, we want to hear it, know it, and understand how we can help support you. Okay, very good. You stand.
Thank you. So, like, if you make a change, what are the measurable improvements so that you can show that the money you put into it was effective in improving X outcome, right? So
Yes.
not just saying, oh, well, DC spends more money on schools, so we should too, or per pupil, so we should too. Because we don't necessarily know that they're successful even though they spend $10,000 more per pupil. You know what I mean? Compared to MCPS. So I guess if there's a way, and these new initiatives that you're putting in that are great, like the accelerator initiatives, I love the story about Topgolf. Is there a way to measure, you know, that and show so you can prove, hey, this had this outcome, this is why we need this money, this is why we need this to keep going, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Great question. So what you're asking is, how are we measuring the impact of these investments? So one of the things that the Board of Education actually charged us to do was to redesign our board meetings and the content that we were bringing to the board meetings this year to really be able to talk about what are these investments, what was the fiscal responsibility to it, and then what is the impact. And the reason I'm so glad that they charged us to do that, because it was right in the vein of what we needed to do, is because once we make the investments, then we have to share with the public what's happening as a result of it. So that's been a process that we've incorporated for that level of accountability to ourselves and to our public in our schools, in our board meetings specifically. But getting further to your point of what do we ultimately want to learn from this? And for me, it's like, what do we want to learn from it to make ourselves even better? And what do we want to learn from it? Because I'm committed to solving problems of public education that we should have been looking at and should continue to look at for years to come. So we've actually connected with some of our universities, recognizing that this is also an interest that they have in researching alongside us in what some of these key initiatives are, so that we can have a research body to be able to look at the impact and, most importantly, help us share exactly what the journey is so that it can help inform what we do internally and others. So I'm so thrilled about that in terms of some of the partnerships that we've been working to establish now, to have partners within our universities to do that. So great question. Thank you. This is the part of the job that I don't like, trying to figure out whose hand went up first and next. But Kristen, thank you. She's going to pass the mic.
Hi, I think this is on. Thank you, Dr. McKnight, Mr. All the staff members that are here and board members. I'm the PTA president of Gaithersburg Middle School, and we have 900 students. Over 80% are racially and ethnically diverse students. We are a majority Black and brown. We have 56% farm students and a number of students who are not eating because their parents are afraid to provide the information. We also have 250 emergent multilingual learners and 200 special educated students. I've submitted testimony for Monday. I'm coming Monday for the CIP hearing. My questions, I have two. One, is it possible to figure out a way to provide more funds to schools that have high farms rates? Because we have zero money in our independent activity fund. And I don't know if any students from GMS attended the Topgolf event. I would like our students to go to more educational activities, because when kids are excited about learning and doing fun things, they want to come to school. They are participating, they're learning. And I'm sorry, but more money enables that. We don't have the funds to pay for buses to go down to the Kennedy Center or to the museums. We don't. So that's the big ask. And that's going to come in January when I testify in January. So that's one. And then the second is there a way to look at what's provided in the farm's lunches? I know this may sound stupid or minuscule, but farm's lunches don't include a cookie. They don't. It's a treat. It's a plus. It's in addition to the lunch. And there are many kids crying because they can't have a cookie. And other kids are pulling their money to get together to buy their friends cookies. I'm asking my son, why do you have 10 cookies a day on your lunch bill? Because he's buying cookies for his friends. I'm sorry, but kids who have farms should get a cookie. I just wish we would look at what we're giving kids for lunches. So 2, give us more money and give us more cookies.
Thank you. And please don't end by saying, I'm sorry. Thank you. We actually want to hear exact narratives like that so that we can continue to improve. So I'm sure the staff is over there taking note. I see them in terms of looking at the farm's meals that we provide. So please continue to share things like that with us, and we will look into that. Both of your questions basically were around equity. That's what you... That's right. Your questions were essentially, how do we make sure our students are getting what they need and acknowledging that they all don't come to us with the same needs. So actually, Mr. Hull, and I'm going to let him speak to this just in a moment, it's one of the very things that we have been talking about. What's driven most of our finance for schools have been enrollment, and I talked about that earlier in terms of enrollment does drive it. But we've also recognized that of 210 schools, many of our schools have different needs. And so we have to look at what those needs are. So like, for instance, we staff our Title I schools, which are elementary schools, differently, acknowledging that they need something, they have different needs. And same for our community schools. A part of our blueprint helps us acknowledge that there are additional schools that aren't Title I schools that require that additional support. So we've actually welcomed the opportunity that the state has brought forward to say, it is okay and appropriate for you to differentiate the types of funding that you need in schools. So we're doing that. And then the other part of it just comes down to community involvement. Like when you talked about the extracurricular money that may be available for some schools, that's involvement, and we recognize that at some schools we're thriving and some schools that we're not. So we're really working with organizations to help figure out how can we get the funding that is needed for those schools to get the things that they need, even if they don't have the body or the involvement that some of our other schools do need in a way. And so we've been inviting others to help us figure out how do we do that. And our foundation, I will say, is one way that we've been able to look at a more equitable way to make sure we're providing additional opportunities for our schools, because they do a lot of fundraising and working with many partners to do that. And so what we've recognized we need to do and will do more of in the future is connecting our schools to what those opportunities are so that they can still get the top golf event that was hosted by many of the funders through the foundation. And I heard you about the implementation, and I'm going to go back and check. If there were no students from Gaithersburg, then we need to know why there were no students from Gaithersburg to make sure we reach them.
I'm not sure if there were. I know that there were students. One of my children's is at a different school, and there were students invited from that school, but I didn't hear that from our school. And I apologize. The last thing I'll say is we don't have any money in our independent activity fund because largely our families can't donate huge amounts of money.
Exactly.
Whereas other schools, like that's not equitable. If we're looked to fundraise from our families, we can't. And we do. I'm personally writing letters and asking companies to donate money, and we corporate fundraise. But we're not getting a lot of money. So our kids are not getting the same access to activities that other schools are. Other schools in the only area have already done 2 field trips already. Like, why aren't we? Because we can't afford it.
No, so that very good point, and that's why I elevated our foundation. So our foundation is one of our funding bodies that we're able to use that works with many other partners. And the goal is that some of our schools don't need the support that they provide, and there are some that do. And so being much more intentional about who are those schools that do need that additional funding so that we can provide more of an equitable lens to what they need. Mr. Hall, anything you want to?
Great, thank you. Wonderful question. I appreciate that. Equity is something that we have talked about since I got here, and I'm sure the conversation was happening long before that. But it really is important because we need to make sure that we are meeting all of our students where they are. Different students have different needs. If you don't speak English as a first language, you might need a little extra support. Students with, special education needs just need a little extra support. And so we need to make sure as district leaders that we are meeting our students where they are and meeting the unique and individual needs of our students. And so that absolutely is a priority. And so we're looking at ways, both in the budget that we're building now and even more importantly, more long-term, how can we differentiate the funding for our schools so that we are providing more where the needs are higher? So that is absolutely something on the radar, something that we are prioritizing and looking at ways that we can do that. You know, as far as the lunch piece goes, you know, that's also very important. You know, we want to make sure, we know that some students qualify for farms. We know, as you said, there are others who qualify but don't sign up for various reasons. And then there are others who might be just above that, you know, threshold that someone in Washington, D.C. came up with. And they may not be able to afford the lunches either. And so this year what we have done is we have said, you know, if any of our students come to the cafeteria and cannot afford a meal, we're going to give them a meal. And we're not just going to give them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. We're going to give them, you know, the full meal that the federal government funds us for. There are, you know, challenges. We obviously as a school district have limited funding, and we have a lot of regulations and policies that we need to work within. And a lot of those come from DC, especially around the lunches and what can be included and how many calories and all of these other things. But we're doing our best to make sure that all of our students have access to healthy and delicious food every day. And as far as the cookies go, you know, that's something that we can look at, because I love cookies, and I think everyone deserves more cookies.
Hi, I'm Leah Bradley. I have 2 kids at Magruder High School. But my question is more related to, I'm an executive director of Empowering the Ages, a community nonprofit. And what we have seen is that it's really hard for nonprofits to work with MCPS. And so there are a lot of nonprofits in the community that would love to support schools like Gaithersburg Middle School and others. We have, my organization, we have all older adult volunteers that want to be invested in their community. And so my question is, as you're building the budget, is there room to think about some of these strategic partnerships? It's not so much money to invest in nonprofits who can give a lot more back to the community. I know that you mentioned the tutoring program before, and the tutoring program is great that it's an online program, but we also know that research shows that one-on-one and ongoing connections is the best way for students to thrive. I have a lot of volunteers that want to get into schools and be able to help students, and there's just a lot of barriers to do it. So if there's any way going forward that it can be easier for people to give back to their community, I think that you'd see there's a lot of human capital available.
Okay, so Leah, you just bought yourself a ticket not out of this room until Elba Garcia, please stand up. Easy, you are in the back. Get your information. And I think we've had this conversation, but yes, I remember. We were having this conversation before. We cannot do the work that we do alone as a school system, and nor will we actually fund our way out of it to eternity. We've got to do it with partners. And I understand what you're saying, and this isn't the first time we've heard this feedback. Yes, there are some things that we have to address legally to make sure that we're protecting our children, and we will do that, and we have to do that. But we also know that we have many community members who can, want to, and have the ability to help us with some of these challenges, especially to your point of, we won't be able to fund in the same way for some of these initiatives that we've had, but we know they are really important. That tutoring is a perfect example. Some of it is virtual, but some of it our schools are actually offering in person. And so our teachers are doing it, but we want to have those experiences continue beyond that federal funding leaving. So Leah, we're going to get your information today. Everybody is a witness. We're going to work with you and really make a commitment to figuring out, and you as well as others who've actually found it very difficult to partner with us in this system. Let's figure out what those things are that's making it difficult so that we can address them specifically, so that we can address that for you as one partner and then others, you know, who may have those resources to help our system, because we need you. So thank you for that. And before you leave, Lee, we want to make sure we connect and sit down and talk about that. Absolutely.
This may seem of a very odd question. So I'm speaking as a community member, but also I work at Watkins Mill High School. And I'm still somewhat new to Montgomery Public Schools, so I'm trying to figure out funding. And I came from Arizona where funds from the state level were determined by enrollment on a particular date. And it also tied into attendance rates. So I'm wondering for Maryland, as we're looking, as we looked at the budget and the percentage of funds that came, how that's determined from the state level. That's question one. And the second question really isn't to any of you up here. It's more to perhaps our Board of Education in terms of equity, why the meetings are during the day when the majority of people are at work and aren't able to participate in attending those meetings in person. So that's just a comment, doesn't even need a response to, but I just thought I would put that out there because I know I've had several, people in my community go, well, I can't go, I'm at work. What happened, what was going on during those meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the last one, and then I don't know where our board members here, if you want to add anything, please do so, and then I'll let Tom address I think Tom, yep, or Rob, address the state piece. But the Board of Education meetings we know are really important. As a matter of fact, over the pandemic, at one point we were meeting every single week for almost a year. And so we heard from our community, we wanted to be able to have meetings more regular. So what we do is try to rotate. And first, welcome to Montgomery County. Glad to have you, and certainly glad to have you in the school system. But we rotate our meetings morning and evening so that we are able to appeal to all to be able to participate. But any feedback that you have about that, we ask you to please email our Board of Education, our ombudsperson, Ravel. We'll definitely want to be able to take that feedback into consideration, but we absolutely making an effort to rotate the times of the meetings so that we can make ourselves available to all audiences, morning and evening.
District, but I represent all of our students. And so you're right. We have grappled with and rotated the times that we do have our Board of Education meetings. And we can give some consideration to having it later, but also we try to be very thoughtful about everybody, right? Because then that means that our staff who has worked all day will stay a little bit longer as well. So that's a thought to keep out there, right? But what we try to do is engage you in different ways, right? We have cluster meetings, so those are in the evening. We're trying to reimagine how we engage our community. So we have, as Dr. McKnight spoke about, Ravel Fitzpatrick. He's been with us almost a year maybe. So what we have charged him with is how can we go out and get with our community outside of board meetings, right? Because we do want it to be informal. We want to make certain that everybody can come and engage with us. So that looks like having coffee and conversation before work, maybe in the evening, maybe on the weekends as well. So we are definitely thinking about different ways to engage our community outside of board meetings, but we will give some more thought to how we can do the meetings and be considerate of everyone's time. But so just know you can send me an email, Shebra_L_Evans@mcpsmd.org, or just email all of us, BOE@mcpsmd.org. But thank you for the question. And so that's something that we're always thinking about, and just know that we're working on how to come out into the community a little bit more outside of board meetings. Okay? Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. And Mr. Riley?
I just want to address the question on state funding. So just some background. In general, there are many school districts in the country that levy taxes. We don't do that in Maryland, right? Ours is appropriated by our county and our state. As for our state funding, that is based on enrollment at a certain period of time, like you said. And it's not just in our enrollment, it's our relative enrollment compared to the other LEAs in the state. So that's why, when we're building the budget, we don't technically have that information as of yet. That's why we get that information as it comes along. So when we go to the Board of Education, we'll have more refined information on what our exact state funding is. State funding, it's relative enrollment, but it's also relative wealth too. So Maryland has built in certain factors based on where Montgomery County stands with our wealth compared to the others. And that's just another factor that's built in to help make it more equitable state funding.
Do you know that date that the state looks at for enrollment?
9:30 is our
September
start
30th.
date.
Absolutely. And we've been watching that too, to actually be able to share with our state, particularly in Montgomery County, how that enrollment happens and more significantly after September 30th, although the funding is only counted up to September 30th.
Can I just add too, so when we build our budget, we're doing projected enrollment, not our official enrollment. So funding is always kind of lagging behind for the reasons Dr. McKnight mentioned. We're getting students coming in throughout the year. So when we build our budget, we're doing it on projected enrollment, but our funding is based on actual.
Ms. Castillo, I think we have 3 more questions. Oh, you got the mic. Very good.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. I'm a parent at Wheaton High School, and my question is, does this budget allocate funds to for marketing, for making all parents and all students in the school system or in a particular school aware of the programs? It's say, for example, the Top Golf program. I doubt that Wheaton High School students were aware of it, had an opportunity, whereas we'd certainly be interested in that. And it's a concern because, particularly with Wheaton, for example, a large number of the parents not only don't participate in PTA, the general sense I have as a parent is that they are completely unaware of what PTA is or even the full functioning of the school. So in terms of our marketing and letting people know, I think that we have to take into account that we have a large segment of the spectrum of student and parent that are being unaccounted for and of which we may be unaware as, I'll call it political insiders in this room.
Thank you. So that goes right to why we have priority number 1, reestablishing trust through strong communications. We recognize and have heard definitely, as I was on my first listening tour in the spring, that our community members say, somehow in a large system, the communication doesn't always get to who it needs to get to and where it is that we need it. And so what we've been doing is investigating the why. And we've actually found some answers to why that has been the case, and have developed some specific, very strategic things to shift that. Like, for instance, we're here today because we got feedback saying that oftentimes when you host events, they're not in different parts of the county. So today is actually an example of why we said, we wanted to come to the community versus holding things in other places, and letting our community partners know who are a part of the community what that information is, so that they're not, if you may read the email from the school system, you may not. But if you hear it in your faith-based organization, or you hear it in an advocacy group that you work closely with, then you're probably going to increase the amount of information that you get depending on how many channels it's coming through to you. So that's just one example of how we've tried to improve that, and then working with our schools to do it too. I've heard from you that our principals are out now more than ever in a way that they have been, and I've seen the pictures to prove it. And that is because they were charged with being within the community and interacting with parents and families and being very thoughtful about how information is being shared. But I should correct one thing. Okay, the Top Golf was not open to every student in Montgomery County. It was a pilot of us trying an activity for students on an out-of-school time day, because we ultimately are going to have many, many, many different types of activities happening. And this one was actually open to middle school students, and there were a number of students that could participate from each school. So, but we did have high school students there, I have to say, who were actually coaches on golf teams that were helping the middle school students. And now you got me interested to find out if Wheaton was there and represented. But we did have them involved from the high school level in terms of supporting students. But definitely one that we continue to think about. And if there's anything else that you think we should do or that we need to do to make sure the information is getting to parents, please let us know that. We're always trying to improve that. And if we can be better tomorrow than we were today, based on a recommendation that you all can share as parents, we want to have that and utilize it. Good job. All right, great, great. Very good. Thank you for checking in on that. Another question?
Thank you. Hello, I'm a proud resident of East County, and I have 2 students who go to Burnsville Elementary School. So I have a few questions, a few comments as well. One of the biggest comments that I have is I loved your presentation. I loved the focus on people. I know we're talking about operating budget, but I wanted to share a story about how capital budgeting impacts operating budgeting. So in Burnsville Elementary, we do not have enough parking for parents when there are school-wide events. The school graciously offers us to park off-site and have a bus driver drive us over to the school so we can all participate. And I had a great conversation with the bus driver. She says that when I went to one of such event, she said that she had started work at 7 a.m. And here I was on the bus at 8 p.m. being dropped off at my car after attending an event. It hurt my heart. It really did. But that is how the capital improvement, capital planning impacts your people. And there is such a close tie there. Not sure if you guys take that into account. So that is a question. If you do take it into account, how do you see the interaction there? Because I think teachers probably have very similar concerns across the board. The story was bus driver because I experienced it this year. I think one of the other comments about participation in different schools, I know from personal experience, I am a graduate of PG County schools. We are now living in Montgomery County, but one of the biggest impacts for me as a student of PG County schools was accelerator programs. And the involvement that the school has on a school-to-school, because I think I heard a principal took a bunch of students to the event. I've seen your principals come out this year strongly, really applaud them for coming out, but you may want to think about doing targeted school programs for accelerators, especially for being on the Burtonsville side. Topgolf is a hard commute to get over to, even on a day off. So finding opportunities that are equitable across geographic locations and partnering with the principals of the schools is a great way to get students involved and out there. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, I love your comments. Love them. Thank you. So yes, yes, and yes. I agree with everything you said. In terms of the opportunities for students, Topgolf was one, but the goal is that we actually have these types of activities hosted by many different organizations in every community in Montgomery County on those out-of-school time days. And I share that with you because the goal is that we want students to be aware of and know the services that are available right near their homes. We want them to actually engage in those partnerships beyond the opportunity that they have when their teachers are taking care of professional learning. So that's something that we're continuing to build out because the goal is, on those days, across the system, that our teachers are having for professional learning in the future, there is some place for every single one of our students to go, all 161,000 of them. And we know Topgolf definitely cannot accommodate a quarter of that, but that's the goal. And so as you think about this and you know of different activities and ideas and things that are in your community that you think we could engage in, please make sure you share that with us. We have our chief of staff here who works with our foundation office and our senior community liaison who are also in the back. Please make sure you share with them any thoughts and ideas you have about that. And thank you for sharing the story of that bus driver. That's a perfect example. I've been out to Burtonsville myself. You know, sometimes it's one thing to hear the narratives, and I heard a lot about some of the traffic and pieces there, and board members have been out as well. We've been together, and so I hear and know exactly what you mean. And while they are two different operating budgets, we agree, one does impact the other, but we are working with our Burtonsville community, and we are going to continue to work with them because we don't want to just make a small fix. We want to make sure that the community gets exactly what it needs to address a number of the things that you mentioned. So thank you. Absolutely. All right. So thank you for letting us take a few extra minutes because we wanted to make sure we had a chance to take all of your questions. The sun is still shining. I'm sure it's still about 70. And thank you to our little ones that are back there in the back. Thank you for coming and spending time with us today. We appreciate you being here. And to our parents, know that we appreciate you. We could not do this without you. You are our partners in this work, and we want to make sure you address that for our staff that are here. Thank you for all that you do. We could not do it without you. And as you continue to share thoughts and ideas to help us figure out how we not only take your thoughts and ideas and operationalize them into fiscal, but also practice. We want to hear that from you. And to our government officials and partners and staff who are here, thank you. It is a indeed pleasure to be a part of the Montgomery County community, because this is a community that always pulls together to accomplish what we need to do, I know, for our children. And it's an honor to serve our community in that way. So thank you for being here. We will be around to talk and take any other questions, but we appreciate you. Thank you for coming out. Have a great day. Communication staff.